Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining the Sierra Club Virginia chapter's webinar on fighting reckless data center growth in Virginia. We're going to go ahead and get started to be respectful of everyone's time. We really appreciate all the interest that has happened on this webinar, not just within the Commonwealth, but also across the country. It is kind of a testament to this issue. Yes, Virginia is the data center capital of the world, but the trends we are seeing here are also happening all across the country. And our hope for this webinar is that you are equipped with some more knowledge about what we've done that has been successful, some lessons learned that have helped us be able to better create campaigns that make sure that just not that data center development is stopped completely. We're not against data center development, but we are against data center development that comes with the trade-off of selling out communities, harming our environment, and doing irreversible damage to fairness and in our political system. And that's what we're seeing. So that's a quick preview. My name is Tim Swinski. I'm the communications director for the Sierra Club Virginia chapter. You're also going to be hearing from Paige Westlink, who is the digital communications lead, and also our data center organizing lead at the chapter. And of course, the wonderful Ann Bennett. She is the data center chair of the Sierra Club Virginia chapter. She is also the author of the groundbreaking report, which is just Unconstrained Demand, which highlights in very specific and very what I would say, and probably had to do excruciating amount of research detail to understand what local impacts look like on a comprehensive level, step by step, and also issue by issue, from water to land use to power demand. So that's what we're going to start with today. Is Ann Bennett is going to go over some of the important elements of what's going on in Virginia, setting the stage essentially as to why this is happening here. It is relevant to, we believe, in other states that we've talked to and tried to lend some support to. And also just make sure that the context is fully understood. One of the things about industry is that they love to leave out context. We're going to try to be as comprehensive as possible. And then you're going to hear from Paige Westlink, who's going to really go into a little bit more detail about the specific harms we've experienced and the threats that data center development that is irresponsible, that is reckless, pose to different communities. And then we'll wrap it up with remarks from myself, who has been working on the ground with two rural areas where we've experienced some wins over the last two months. So we hope that you leave with this with a wealth of knowledge and hopefully some optimism as well. Big tech is no joke. It's a giant, well-funded industry, but that doesn't mean that they're more powerful than us when we come together. So with that, Anne, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. I just want to share that I got my start with the data center world because we were fighting the world's largest proposed data center campus next to the Manassas National Battlefield Park, which is a national park, one of our national parks. And so that is now in litigation many 3 years later, and so also a testament, like Tim said, to the fight at the local level. Sometimes you really can prevail. So just to give you a sense, not everybody lives in an area where data centers have been built or built yet. This gives you a sense of how big they are. These are pretty much what they look like. They're getting bigger than this as well. On the right side, you can see some generators and coolers to keep for the air conditioning to keep the facility cool. And then on the left, you get a sense of how much land they are sort of gobbling up at the local level. And next slide, please. All right. So while we are now seeing more data centers throughout the world, actually, and certainly throughout the US, Virginia is the largest data center sort of epicenter in the world. Still, we believe we are that 70% of the world's data flows through Virginia. And that's why it's worth studying and learning from, we think. We're here because basically the data centers are here because the fiber was laid here early on for the internet. We've had very favorable state and local regulation. very cheap power with our Dominion, our monopoly utility in Virginia. There's close proximity to the seabed fiber optic cables, um, and a few other reasons, and just a willingness of local government to welcome the local tax revenue that data centers do bring. Next slide, please. So this gives you a sense of what the new data centers look like. This is what I think you would call a 4-story data center. So they are building both up and out, so taking up more land, but also trying to squeeze in as much density as they can in one facility. Um, on the right side, you can see, Amazon in Virginia. Amazon is about half of the industry here, but Microsoft, Google are also very, very big players. And as we said, local government, utilities, lots of utilities, water is becoming a bigger issue. And all of this is really, at least in our state, led by the economic development authorities and our governor. And most of these companies that are siting here are not headquartered here, although Amazon is an exception to that. Next slide, please. So this is an enormous problem. We try to find a way to quantify how many buildings, how many square feet, how many diesel generators. There are a number of ways to sort of measure how big the industry is. We have come up with over 400 million square feet of data center development that either exists, is in the pipeline, or has been proposed. That is the equivalent of at least 64 Pentagon buildings. That's another Virginia building as well. Really hard to wrap your arms around how big that is, but we are expecting it could be as many as 1,300 data centers throughout the state. So it's really a lot, and we have not been prepared for it, and that's also why this is an enormous problem. We haven't had the energy and planning, the forethought, not enough regulation either at the state or the local level to address the challenges and the massiveness of this industrial build out here, which includes transmission, substations, energy, natural gas plants, and possibly even nuclear power. On the right, you'll see the Google. Top right that is one of Google's very big facilities under construction in northern Loudoun County, and a picture of a natural gas plant that was purchased for data center use by Blackstone. So we're seeing more of that as well, taking power, for private use. Next slide, please. Yeah, so here's another unique situation that Virginia faces, and I know there are other states that are beginning to see a little bit of this, but we have at least 40 jurisdictions that either have data centers or will have data centers. And so that means if we are engaged in local advocacy or trying to impact the outcome of a public hearing or a particular proposal, we have to be in lots of different places almost at the same time. That is really, really a challenge. And no organization is big enough to be everywhere, but our volunteers also on the ground are very helpful here. But the number of counties and towns and cities that are welcoming this kind of industrial development is really unusually large. Next slide, please. And so really the bottom line comes down really to two things, but one of the major things is the fact that we are all paying for this. We are paying for the increased electricity costs, particularly in our area, our grid area. We've seen a 22% increase in costs. Dominion Energy is right now before a Public Utility Commission asking for rate increases of 15%. it could be as much as more than $21 a month on an average bill. And also the federal legislation, the quote unquote big beautiful bill, with its reducing of support for cheaper renewable fuels, that will also require an increase overall in the nation's energy costs, and we will all bear that. So we are seeing at the federal level, we're seeing at the state level, and our goal is, of course, to make sure that ratepayers see some relief, and that these companies pay for the power that they need in order to meet their own private business concerns. So, big issue. The other one, of course, is carbon emissions. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Next slide, please. So this is something we are beginning to see literally hundreds of in Virginia. This is a substation. They all look a little different. This is one view of an area that has literally 4 adjacent substations between Loudoun and Prince William counties. And this is just one of the things that comes along with data centers. We need to build a lot of substations and transmission. And in order to service what we have counted so far is over 60 gigawatts of new power that's needed. I mean, that's new power. So 60 gigawatts is the equivalent of 68 new coal plants, a little fewer, and almost the equivalent number of new natural gas plants. So it's not clear how this demand is going to be met if the market holds up. And this 60 plus gigawatts is really only about half of the projects that are that we know about. We don't have data for all of the projects yet. So next slide, please. On the right side, this is a brand new road that has infrastructure along it. You can see, I believe those are Amazon data centers and a substation and these enormous new transmission lines. That's pretty common trio that you see together. And on the left, this is one of the crown jewels, the W&OD trail that has transmission along 33 miles of it. And I share this because recently Dominion, our local utility, began to clear cut along the trail. And that is because they are apparently preparing to upgrade the transmission along the trail. So they've kind of broken agreement with the park and clear cuts 4 acres so far. But this is, again, just some of the things that we are beginning to see as byproducts of the data center industry. And we have to work with the parks and the utility and our elected officials to ensure that these kinds of degradations do not continue to occur on a public recreational facility. Next, please. So this, again, a couple of substation. This is the other part on the right side is the western part of the W&OD, where you see data centers all along it. This is where people bike and walk, and that's what they get to see now in Loudoun County, out not too far from Dulles International Airport. And the slide on the left is what the new substations look like. These are really not what I grew up with as a substation, and you can see there's a very tall wall around it. And so when a developer or a company comes in and says, "Oh, we're going to build a wall," that's about as far as they can get with a wall, unless they're going to go all the way up. And I have not seen that happen. So we cannot. It's very difficult when you're building substations at this scale to enclose them or to obscure the ugly view. And many of these are now very close to residents and small business. Next slide. So what we have seen, give you just a little sense of how big, the build out is on the top right. Virginia is now the number one importer of energy in the United States, and that is because of the data centers. Our electric co-ops are almost all of their energy load will be for data centers coming up. And that's just growing exponentially. And we're literally talking about hundreds and hundreds of new data centers where we actually don't know where the energy is coming from. But we know that we're bringing in new sources of natural gas, and it's reversing Virginia's. We were at a situation where we were reducing the amount of energy that the state needed because of efficiency and renewables. And now we really look like our demand curve really looks like a hockey stick. It was just almost 180% reversal. And Virginia is we may be the number one importer, but other states are seeing this as well. Next slide, please. So just giving you a sense here, in Virginia, these are what we call the mega projects. That means they each need at least a gigawatt of power, which is, let's say, roughly the equivalent of one coal plant or one natural gas plant. And so far, they're actually more than 28 now, but because this number always seems to be going up. But these are sometimes 8, 10, 12 data centers on a campus, and the campuses get bigger as you go into the rural areas. And some of them are projected to have as many as 30 data centers. So we'll see, but this adds up to 37 gigawatts of power already, just these 28 projects. So that gives you a sense of scale. I'm going to turn it over to Paige.
Thanks, Anne. Really appreciate everything that you bring to the table. I know Tim already spoke on this, but Anne is truly a celebrity when it comes to all of the information that we know about data centers and when it comes to understanding the data center growth in Virginia specifically. She's really done such incredible work putting together a report that we will link at the end of this slideshow for y'all to read. And we are so much better, stronger, and smarter with her, on our team. So anyway, I want to talk about kind of want to zoom in a little bit and talk about community impacts because when we think about data centers on the ground, Virginia is really in a position where we've seen developments play out and we've seen the impacts that they've had on people's lives. And what we're seeing across the board, and the picture that Anne really painted, is that data centers in Virginia are taking more than they give. They're over-promising and under-delivering. We are at a place in Virginia where, and across the nation really, where when there is a data center development, we have a huge loss of land. We are looking at an energy cost and an energy crisis in our state. Like Anne said, we import more energy than any other state already, and we do not have enough energy to power the data centers as they are currently proposed in our state. We have increased air pollution because of these data centers, which Anne talked about a little bit, and I will talk about more. We are decreasing our access to clean water, decreasing our access to water across the board because of how much water data centers use to stay cool. And there's a constant noise that comes from data centers that we're actually finding is connected to some negative health issues in surrounding communities. That's a huge concern. We're finding that the constant noise can affect things like sleep, can increase anxiety. And so this is newer research, but it is something that is on our radar, and it's something that we're hearing from communities, which Tim will talk about more. So I want to dive into pollution and cost. When we talk about data centers, we have to talk about pollution and we have to talk about cost to people. Data centers are expensive. Why? In Virginia, we have, as Anne talked about, we have over 1,000 data centers coming to our state. Data centers require a lot of energy. And so Dominion Energy, our main utility, as a solution to giving them power, is proposing us to build new fossil fuel infrastructure, new gas plants across our state. And also, we're keeping coal plants open in places like West Virginia in order to power these things. This is a problem on the pollution side because gas plants are horrible for our air. They're really bad for people's health. And we in Virginia actually were on target to hit all clean energy by 2045. And we would have been there had it not been for data centers alone. That is the sole reason why we are looking at more pollution in our communities. And how does this tie into cost? So every time Dominion proposes a new gas plant, those costs, which these projects can cost billions of dollars, are passed on to our electric bills. I know Ann talked about this a little bit, but just to break it down, anytime a data center proposes that gas plant pass on to our electric bills, we have to pay those costs. We have to pay for some of the infrastructure that's needed to get that energy from the gas plant to the grid or to the data center, I should say. And those are big costs that add up. Anne broke down the cost for you specifically, but the concern here is when we're building new gas plants for the sole purpose of powering data centers, why are people paying for that? These data centers that need this energy are the data centers of trillion-dollar tech companies who could easily pay for the energy themselves. And we need to continue to demand that across the board. It's unfair for families to be footing the bill for these trillion-dollar companies. As we pay them in multiple ways, we also pay for their services. I use Amazon. It's cheap and it's fast, and that is the truth. But I don't need to be paying for their energy needs too. The other way we pay them, which Ann talked about a little bit, is we have state tax subsidies in Virginia that other states have copied too, where we basically give them a tax break just for being here. And we've tried to tie things to that benefit to say, hey, if you actually want that tax break, which I personally don't think they should have at all, then you have to follow X, Y, and Z. You have to be powered by clean energy so you aren't polluting our communities. And so there are ways to hold them accountable that we are not doing in Virginia. I want to talk about the issue of diesel generators. So on the ground, Anne showed some pictures of data centers and what they look like. All data centers in Virginia come with these massive backup diesel generators. Data centers can have hundreds of backup diesel generators. They are tractor trailer sized backup diesel generators. Diesel is extremely polluting. It also is really bad for our health because it emits something called PM 2.5. PM 2.5, it's a tongue twister, is the pollution that we can't see, but we're breathing it in. And it's really, really bad for our health. It's especially bad for children. It also leaks things like arsenic and benzene, which are poisonous. And it's linked in general to higher rates of cancer, cardiovascular, and respiratory diseases. And it particularly is bad for kids. Cannot say that enough. When we have these diesel generators, these data centers that are essentially placed in residential areas, we had one in Charles City County that was denied that would have been 50 feet from the nearest home. And they are releasing these plumes of smoke when they all turn on at the same time. That pollution shouldn't be next to where people live. It shouldn't be next to, where children play or where we have hospitals or where we have nursing homes. That is not fair to people. And right now, we don't have any safeguards in place to prevent that in Virginia. In Virginia, we are permitted to have 9,407 diesel backup generators, tractor trailer size generators. That's a lot. That's more than any state should have to have. And the thing about it is they're not just used for testing. I know that people will hear that, well, we only run them from data center companies. We only run them to test them. And we found this to be untrue. We've actually seen just this summer them turn on during emergency when maybe there's a really hot day and there's a lot of energy that's needed in various places and a lot of power that's needed. Basically, these data centers have been kicking on their generators. This happened in Northern Virginia. And we saw videos of smoke coming from these backup diesel generators in these communities. It's a real concern. Loudon requested to run the backup diesel generators, which now they have over, I think it's 5,000, maybe more in Loudoun County alone. Um, they requested them to run them 24/7 in 2022. Imagine if we had let that happen. We would be in a horrible position. That community would be drowning in pollution. So the diesel generators are a huge concern. The water issue is a problem. Data centers need a massive amount of water to stay cool because if you think about your computer when it gets really hot, you have that internal fan that's going. Data centers use water to keep those buildings cool. And we've seen in Virginia that they've used over 2.1 billion gallons in 2023 alone. We know that they require a lot of water because we've also heard that they're asking for a lot of water in Virginia. In Caroline County, they actually asked to use 14, up to 14 million gallons of water a day. And they claimed it was for people and industry. But if we're doing the math, it's easy to, since there's not a big population growth happening in Caroline County, it's easy to understand why they were looking for that water and what they needed it for. And we need to have a better understanding before these things are approved of just how much water that they need. And that brings me to this issue of transparency and accountability when it comes to data centers. When we went to a local hearing in Caroline County about an Amazon data center, they had already approved the project and they didn't know where they were going to get the water from. And that was the project that I had on the previous slide that one of their data centers is going to use 346,000 gallons of water a day. They did not know where they were going to get their water from. We cannot be allowing these data centers to continue to take more than they give in our state, to not release information like how much water they're using. We really don't know how much energy each data center is using. We are in a situation where we found that localities are under non-disclosure agreements with data center companies, so they can't release a lot of information, even if we are requesting it, even if a community is requesting it. And the other thing I want to talk about is this issue of revenue. We hear all the time about revenue for localities, money for localities. There are so many different ways that we can look at the benefits that we're getting from data centers, and it still will never outweigh all of the impacts that these data centers are having on our community. There is a way to build them where they are not having these impacts, where we can demand better from these data centers, and we are not doing that in Virginia at this point. We have situations where a data center leased to a bank in a locality, which made it tax-free. And so, what this locality thought they were originally going to get in local funds from that data center, they actually aren't seeing. There's also situations where property taxes could be lowered when data centers come into communities because nobody wants to live next to them. These are real scenarios that we have to take into account when the promise of these data centers are dangled in front of local decision makers that we need to be thinking about is what is the true cost that we are not always taking into account when it comes to this development. And then I want to talk about the missing context that we have. I know Tim touched on this a little bit in the intro, but data centers, as I said at the top, they are the exclusive reason that we have more pollution that Dominion is looking at building more pollution in our communities. We have a proposed plant in Chesterfield, Virginia right now because of data centers, because data centers need power. That is something we are all going to pay for. That is something that that local community is going to pay for with their health, that everyone will pay for with their health. It's a horrible situation that we really need to get a hold on. The other thing is they can't afford to get off of things like diesel generators. They are trillion-dollar companies. They can invest in clean energy. They can invest in backup power that does not harm people's health. And the other thing I want to touch on is this idea of jobs being associated with data centers. When a data center company developer comes into a community, a lot of the time these developers are actually from out of state. And the jobs that they use for the construction a lot of the time are also from not that local area, so they're not providing jobs and they're short term. And most of the jobs that are actually in the data center are highly technical and it's not usually bringing in a lot of local work as they are promising. So it's important that we have that full picture. And then the other thing that is really important to know is that when we're talking about cost and we're talking about what people are paying on their electric bills, it's important to note that data centers are able to negotiate for their electric bill prices and families are not. There are, when a data center gets a contract with Dominion to get power, that is a private contract that we do not get to see. It is behind closed doors. So now we really are making our best guess with all of the information that Anne has put together, with everything that we can find about the impacts of this. And I think if we had the full picture, we already know it's bad, we would really understand, you know, to what extent these data centers are not paying their fair share. Um, and then I'm going to pass it over to Tim to zoom in on these local fights and how we're winning and all the amazing work that's been going on from the community level.
Thanks, Paige. Quick note about everything. I was a bad intro host. Please use that sweet Q&A button at any time if you have questions as we're talking, and we're going to get to the Q&A section at the end of this. So, as Paige and Anne had kind of illustrated, there's a lot of things working against communities just based off the structure, the political structure, the regulatory structure, utility structure in Virginia. But the fights that we've been having on the ground, the resistance that's been going on against this irresponsible development from big tech, I do think these lessons are universal. I do think that things that have been going on there and that work there can work everywhere. There is a little bit of an advantage in that sense because we are the data center of the capital of the world. And so we know what the worst case scenario looks like. So we're going to go ahead and get started and talk a little bit about that. Paige, you can go to the next slide. Before we get into the specifics of all of these, I think it's important to just kind of put a finer point on what this looks like from real people. These testimonials kind of capture people who have been in communities where they felt like it was a bait and switch a little bit too, where it's like, we got this, so it could be a forever home, and no one told me a data center was coming. I'm not big on reading text, but I will. I think it's important to note what Stephanie Brooke, as featured in Business Insider, said. It affects the way we spend our time if the noise is occurring. If we want to sit out, it's pretty unpleasant. We're hearing this buzz. It's not all the time, but when it does occur, it's for longer periods of time, sometimes a whole day at a time. That is where she lives, and that's what she has to deal with on a daily basis. And then, of course, there's another person, Carlos Yanes, and this was, again, a testimony and a feature in the Washington Post about living next to an Amazon data center, less than a few hundred feet. It's affected me financially and emotionally and in every other way I can think of. If what I've known, what I was walking into a few years back, I never would have chosen this place. Both of those people live in Northern Virginia, which is where the largest concentrations of data centers are. And with the way that big tech is promising the development of AI, when it's promising this development of explosive growth in data, this we're all facing the real possibility that this could come to anyone's community, to anyone's backyard. If you have a space, especially if you're in rural areas, because the new AI data centers, what they call hyperscale data centers, they need a lot of different space, they need a lot of different water, and they like to save money by putting them close to transmission lines, which happen to be right next to communities. So we'll go to the next slide. These are the two wins I wanted to touch on. Now, these are not the only wins we've been having in Virginia. In fact, just in the last 2 weeks, Prince William, for the first time, said no to rezoning an area from agriculture to industrial, which is part of the classic playbook from big tech to buy agriculture land and then change the rules through the board of supervisors and say, we're going to build a data center on it now. Switch it from agricultural to industrial. It's like one of the rules that they have to get changed. Side by side, these projects look a little different, but the fight was essentially the same. You know, the Chesapeake one was what we would consider a smaller data center. It was only 350,000 square feet. It makes me laugh to think that that's considered a small data center because that's still massive. Same situation. It was the developer wanted to build it on agricultural land, but couldn't do that unless the board of supervisors said, okay, we can rezone it from agriculture to industrial. There were several dozen homes within 500 feet, and there were over 300 homes within a mile. It was also located across the street from a generational farm that was like the cornerstone of a community in Chesapeake, farmers market. People all go there all the time. And when I went there for the first time, I went to visit it. to talk to them. And you could see right outside their front door, right across the street, big orange sign that said, no trespassing. This is going to be an area for a data center. There's a public hearing on this if you want to talk about it. Um, and I went in, I asked the lady who worked there, she didn't want to be named, but it was her family's business. And I said, what do you feel about this data center thing? And she said, I don't like it, but they have a lot of money and we don't. So there's not much I can do about it. If that doesn't frustrate you, I don't know what will, because that's exactly what the rules are set up to do when it comes to big industry and small communities. It says, well, sorry, you can't write the big checks, you can't help with this revenue. But it's important to remember that those localities, they pay taxes too. The people living on the front lines of data center development, they contribute to their economy and their society too. And their voices should be important. And that's exactly what the citizens of Chesapeake did. And it ultimately made that argument in various different ways to the Board of Supervisors. And the Board of Supervisors knew that they could either be on side of the people or on side of the big industry. And they unanimously denied it. A similar situation happened in Charles City County, but this one was a massive hyperscale data center, 515 acres. It would have been, again, same situation, built on land that could have been, that was agricultural, but they didn't like that it was agriculture. They didn't like that they had permission to build an agriculture project. They wanted to make it industrial so they could put a giant data center. This one would have been less than 50 feet from generational homes dating back to the Civil War era, and would have been less than 500 feet from over 120 plus homes, 120 plus families. Most of them, by the way, or at least half of those families had young children. Um, Community made a big deal about it, and it was clear the Board of Supervisors was going to deny it. So instead of admitting defeat, the industrial pulled out before the decision could be made. So a win's a win. Doesn't really matter how you get there. But ultimately, at the end of the day, no community should be put in that position where they have to think about selling their home at a lower property value, mind you, but but literally having to leave the place that they call home, that they've always known, just because big tech wants to make a buck off of them. That's the reality. If strip it down to its most essential elements, that is what's going on. Let's go to the next slide. When it gets to questions, so I'll try to get through these things. All right, so this is just the strategy snapshot. This is something that is part of what we've done that we've seen that has been successful. Now, at the small run-of-the-mill nonprofit Sierra Club, people just call our office and we talk to them directly. And for both those two situations, that's exactly what happened. People called, one of us answered, it pissed us off, and we said, let's go down there and see what's going on. So similar stories, and this is just the two wins we're taking on, but this is I literally spoke at Goochland County last Saturday because the same situation. It all follows the same thing. We didn't know this was happening. This was made behind closed doors, and we only got word of notice of this massive scale that could change the character of our community um, a week and a half ago, before one of the decision moments is going to be made. That's ridiculous, number one. But number two, that's just the playbook they use. They want to have a bunch of planning until it's not ready and then give the community very little time to be able to respond. Now, since we have the research that Ann Bennett has masterfully constructed and put together, we know that we don't necessarily have to know everything about that data center project, but we do know what the worst case scenario looks like. So if we know what the worst case scenario looks like, we're just providing context. So we always try to do a community event, not one run by the decision makers, because those ones are tailored in a certain way. Their rules are set up to essentially, whether it's intentional or not, it's surgically designed to disadvantage us. It's not the same thing as having a community town hall if you just have to write questions on a note card and then they get to decide which ones they're going to answer. It needs to be someone who's knowledgeable about this, that can answer as many questions as needed and hear the concerns of the community, actually internalize what they're thinking. After that, we essentially, during that process, we have a discovery of concerns and try to make a thematic tapestry around it, right? We try to make sure that, okay, this is what I'm hearing. And by the way, every time I go to one of these places, every time Paige goes to one of these places, we hear the same story. Something's happening to us that's unfair. I'm worried about water. I'm worried about what it's going to do to my home. I'm worried what it's do to my health. And our leaders aren't listening to us. So there's automatically built in a demand for people to want to get organized and do something. They just necessarily been in that position before and just need a guiding light. That's what the role we try to play. And since we're considered a legitimate advocacy organization, we have connections and experience of like getting media attention. whether it's through your traditional legacy media, like, the local news, or helping them set up social media that connects the community, setting up those pages and making sure the word is out there and making sure we're taking away the excuse for decision makers to say, oh, I didn't know this was such a big deal. That is the number one thing that a lot of these communities start doing right afterwards. And then once that happens, you build momentum, and then you get organized, and then you have people make a huge kind of theatrical stink at the decision-making moments or prior to the decision-making moments. So, everyone's board of supervisors, local governments, they should have, if we actually have we actually care about democracy in this country, they should have some period of public comments. Planning commissions should be the same way. And regardless if the data center was on that agenda, people spoke out at those. And all that does is create a apparatus of accountability, as I like to call it. So we'll go to the next slide. I think this is important to note. Now, it's also important to note that like a lot of these areas are conservative rural areas. That doesn't mean that their voices don't matter, but that does tell you a little bit about the demographics and the people in the background. Now, that's not always 100% true, but it is important to recognize like what is the ways that we can make sure that they trust us? What are the ways that we can make sure that they're being most effective? And I think in order to do that, you have to tap into the concern. It's organizing principle, meet people where they are, right? And so I think it's good to just list out what the concerns have been, not just in these two places, I'm using them as wins, but like of the 7 different localities that I've been to over the Commonwealth, these are always part of it. And you can see a lot of the things that we touched on earlier. But I think what it really is the biggest ones, and the most kind of essential one actually is corporate greed. Most people are worried about corporate greed. I don't think you have to be taught a lesson or get some educational knowledge or foundational knowledge about corporate greed. It is apparent in our everyday lives. So why would this be any different? And fundamentally, that is what this is. If they're going to build a data center so that they can save money by making ratepayers pay for it and also putting it right next to people's homes, they're going to do it. That is the through line through all of these initiatives. What people just generally don't care about, and we've had mistakes of sometimes Sierra Club folks, but also other partners try to, they want to talk about the climate impacts. They want to talk about the very minute details of like kilowatts and energy systems and all of this other stuff. People care about how much power they use, but not the scientific descriptions of those. And then, of course, the technological aspects. Like beyond water usage, people want to know what the outcome is, not why or how it happens. And if you get too long down in the weeds, then people try to over explain it, and over intellectualizing things is not being able to, as we're going to talk about next, put the industry on defense. And if you can put them on defense, that's the first step of winning. So let's go to the next slide. And I see your question, Elizabeth, and I want to, we'll answer that some more when we get to that part. Paige and Ann both talked about NDAs. It is part of the process. Look, there's this excuse for the industry to say it's competitive advantage. We don't want our competitors knowing all these things, so we want to have NDAs. Sure, but if this is going to have massive implications on the community's well-being and livelihoods, you should have to answer basic questions, but NDAs cover them. Also, something I didn't know is that it's not every board of supervisor person or every planning commissioner having to sign all individual NDAs. A lot of times, localities can just appoint one person to sign an NDA for everybody to have to adhere to. That's a problem. I'm not even sure that's constitutional, but no one's ever, I think, taken it to the Supreme Court. But that's the reality. And again, explaining this as the process of like what the public policy making process is versus what it should like, that has become a key narrative. Nobody likes closed door meetings when it comes to the scales that could change the very character of their communities. Nobody likes behind the door or closed deals and closed door meetings when it comes to doing something that could fundamentally impact people's health, a large amount of people's health, especially since those people, like I said, pay taxes too. And then, of course, no one likes to be limited. If this is a huge issue that could fundamentally change the livelihoods of people, why aren't they allowed to speak about it? Why aren't they allowed to have a lot of Q&A with the decision makers and the policy makers? And why does the industry get to do a community meeting where they don't actually answer questions? They just set you up with a bunch of tables with people who was like, this expert knows this, talk to them about that. This expert knows this. Oh, this is our on-site electrician. None of them answering the question that really are fundamentally important to people. So that's what do. You set up your own rules. You set up your own rules. You set up your own town hall meetings. You set up a people's town hall meetings. You invite experts that might not be paid for by the industry. Like I'm not making the big bucks as a nonprofit worker. I'm making the medium bucks of someone who's the communications director who has to know a lot about this, but no one's paying me to stop data centers. We're just getting requested by the community. That legitimacy is important. But also during those people town halls, they work both ways because then you can record them and also get people's concerns. And that's something we try to help with is we record everything so everything's on the record and we send it to the decision makers. Same thing. Like a lot of times there's also like statistical data that community members find, like traffic conditions. What will the construction look like? How much pollution can come from those aspects? How much is it going to cost the county to build the on-ramp or hire new first responders? They think that they have to be able to present those with permission. You don't need permission to do that. You can hold your own press conferences. You can hold your own community meetings around that. And then, of course, and this is the most important, if you have a message that it requires you to include studies, facts, and figures, the message isn't strong enough. Be able to frame issues by saying, let's tell the story first, and then we use statistics and science as evidence. Moral clarity is the sword, the study is the shield. I think that's the best way to describe it. And that's the thing. These narratives are purposely designed to be binary. They are not answering directly what elected officials say. They're not what the industry says. It's trying to get them to respond to us, get them to play defense to us. We don't have to defend our position because we're just trying to do what's right for people. We're trying to give people a voice. We're trying to make sure that no one gets sold out for the profits of big tech. That's what they have to answer. Not how are you going to find the water or how are you going to power these things? It's why are you doing this to me and why aren't you listening to me? And if you do that, the industry ends up playing defense. That means the community is winning. So let's go to the next slide. In that same vein, it's kind of repetitive, so I'm just go through this. But like the tactics is like very simple ones. Anyone can do. Set up a social media page, Facebook pages. I listed the ones that those two places created. Usually, and then have following. Have that as a community center so that people can express their concerns. Yeah, there's going to be some people with left field ideas and nutty conspiracy theories, but they're all part of the tapestry of the community that's against one singular project. Being able to unify people in a singular place, that's huge. Because it gets everybody on the same page, gets everyone in a coordinated space. And that doesn't take a lot of lift either. Just we created this space so people can listen to us. And also when there's action opportunities, this is how you do it. Go there to sign this petition. Go there to find out where we're going to meet tonight. That kind of thing. When it comes to petitions, we do believe, and petitions, by petitions, we mean not one big petition, but like sending messages directly to their legislators. We like to create pre-written messages that people can add on to. But again, yes, we can add some technical elements, but we lean all the way in on issues of fairness. And I used an example of what we did in Chesapeake that ultimately ended up being responded to this framing. If you approve this facility, you're signaling to the industry that this locality is willing to sell out our communities for the sake of big tech profits. After Chesapeake was defeated and the press asked a board of supervisor, they said almost that exactly. I'm worried that if we put this one up there, approve this one, it'll signal to the industry that we'll sell out all our communities. Like it works. Elected officials have a lot to think about. They have a lot to worry about. They have a lot to answer to. Sometimes giving them the talking points, the ones that could be on your side, they love that. They are able to do it. And by the way, we should be messaging in a way that our elected officials should be campaigning on in everything that we do. But it works really well when the odds are against the communities because the odds are always against the communities because they're not as rich as big tech. So yeah, and when we do that as well, essentially the golden goal, the golden goose we want to acquire is like, let's set up making not the decision makers look like bad guys, not shaming them, make the industry look like the villains. And that gives the opportunity for decision makers to look good if they agree with you. I have a master's in communications. What I learned through that of studying misinformation and how to be an effective climate spokesperson is the best thing you can do to be a persuasive or to be social advocacy in communication is to make people look like jerks for disagreeing with you. So let's go to the next slide, which I think is just a great way to put this. And like, we hope people from other states are watching this so you can reach out to us and we can share some more of this. This is just a high level 1,000-foot view. But like what our role is not taking over anything. What our role is not telling what people to say and how they should think about something. It's leaning into what their concerns are and helping them polish it. And we can do that with simplifying the message. We do that with any resources we can share. I'm a strong believer that if you're supporting community, even if it's just $250 or $100 as nonprofits, we should be putting our money where our mouth is. And then also, we are considered experts. At least a couple of news publications that have covered some of the stuff Paige and I have done, they consider us all experts. I agree with the and part, and most of the Paige part. I'm just a guy who says people shouldn't just be left out in the cold or be ignored, and that they can be powerful too. Because to put a finer point on all of this, and I tell this every time I go to communities, it's they're doing this because they think that you're not smart enough or passionate enough or rich enough to stop them. And while we're here is to help you prove them wrong. So that's what we have. That's the whole thing. So Paige and Ann, I'm sure we'll come back, but these are some action steps. This is the first one. If you live in Virginia, you can send a message to our federal leaders. Our federal leaders really need to hear from this because they always use this excuse that it's a local issue, which is complete BS because it's not a local, it can't be a local issue because pollution doesn't stay in one locality and electric bills are going to be raised, tripled probably, and that's not an exaggeration. And that's also from Dominion Energy, our largest utility, not from us. But they're still ignoring it. And they're ignoring it. I don't know why, for reasons I'd love to talk about, but this is not the forum for it. But we still need to hear and see a public demand. I used to work in the Senate. I know if a few people send um, a few constituents send a message to their legislators, it's generally added as a topic agenda for staff meetings. Doesn't mean to listen to it, but it's good that they're talking about it. And if you're not in Virginia, we hope you can use that as a template to create your own kind of petitions to your elected officials, whether they be state or federal or local. And then the second thing is please read our report. Ann Bennett has created a masterpiece of all the things that we need to do so that we have that armor that I was talking about, that shield I was talking about. Every time a developer tries to say something, I know exactly which part is complete BS or is a complete half truth or is missing context because of Ann's report. And I think that report is universal. It's not, there's some stuff about our unique utility side of it, but the operations and how these things come to manifest, it's really, really good. 62 pages long, but it's a great read. Also the executive summary. So, Ann and Paige, if you want to come back, we'll do some more Q&A. I think I see that Ann is has answered a couple of these, but I think it's important to bring this one up in particular, Elizabeth's. So, what is the answer to the need for data centers? I mean, people aren't giving up their smartphones, for example. Yeah, it's completely different. That's apples to arsenic. That's how bad those comparisons are. Because we're not talking about things that we're using and need right now. We're talking about AI, this magical thing that's supposed to change all of our lives. But AI if one can be harmful for the economy, can be replace white collar jobs and blue collar jobs. It can be a lot of these things, but it's also not the point that they're being used as data centers. If we don't have AI, we still have our smartphones, we still have our Netflix, we still have those things. What the industry is pushing is not what our data centers up were yesterday. A cloud storage data center ebbs and flows with energy. An AI data center is 100% of processing power 100% of the time, and it's just to help industry push something that could end ultimately doesn't do much in terms of services for us. It just helps things people do faster. The other thing is that's also a distraction technique that I would say that they use. And it's like, okay, maybe we need them, but if the company that's going to benefit from them, why aren't they paying their fair share? And they're not doing that anywhere across the country. They're increasing an energy demand for AI, not for Netflix and not for email, not for Zoom, like we're doing right now. They're doing it for their own profits and their own endeavors. And yet, all the claims of AI have still not even come to manifest. A lot of people think it's a bubble, but why should we have to pay for it? Paige mentioned this over and over again, and it's so true. These are $1 trillion companies. We shouldn't have to pay for it, but that's what they want us to do. It's not a fair deal. It's not fair. And that's what we always bring it down to. So I don't know, Paige, or Ann, if you wanted to add on to that.
No, I think that was beautiful, Tim. Oh,
Yeah,
Andy, go ahead.
that's really well said. I would just also add that we've always had data centers in Virginia. It's not we've had data centers for your phones for years and for all sorts of electronic communications and applications. What pivoted for our state between maybe around 2022 is that the artificial intelligence came to market faster than predicted, and those applications can be up to what we've understood to be up to 10 times as energy intensive as just using your phone. So this is not what's putting us over the edge. It's like Tim said, these newer applications. And we have been told that some companies are just trying to keep their energy consumption level, uh, with the new technology. But as we know,
Oh, it's terrible lighting.
all of the big companies can no longer meet their own carbon emissions goals, their own corporate goals, and they've had to basically abandon them when they publish their data. And they're, and it's a sign. It's just a sign.
Yeah, and we're talking about environmental justice and just basic nature of fairness. I would also say, like, if these tech companies are as smart as they claim to be, they should be able to figure out how to do this without damaging our communities or their own climate goals. I mean, they like to play lip service, but they are the number one thing that keeps fossil fuels alive. And then not just keeping them alive and preserving them, they're also being used as an excuse for a new fleet of fossil fuel projects across the country, not just in Virginia, but everywhere. So it's disingenuous for them to say, no, look over here, don't look over here, because that's what they're doing. And we got to continue to hold them accountable by calling it out. Um, I see this other question, and I see you typing it. Supervisor Mike Pruitt and Abhimar Kari reference potential breakthrough in quantum computations, another vulnerability data centers from the economic perspective. Yeah, so this is a little bit in the weeds, but I will mention, and I'm sure Ann can add on to this. Um, Paige and I get invited to a lot of speaking gigs with the industry. The last one I was at the National Academies of Arts and Sciences, and it was a conference on the societal implications of AI. So I heard from the industry themselves, and they talked about this question. Their talking point is, oh, well, things will just get easier to use. It won't be AI replacing jobs. It'll be people who are good at AI and people who aren't. That's BS, number one. Because, I mean, well, not to get too in the weeds, but like companies are financially incentivized to cut costs. And what we've seen throughout our economic history, especially over the last 50 years, is one of the fastest ways they do that is employment. So again, disingenuous kind of argument. But the second thing is what they're doing, and this is from them. You can look on the National Academy of Arts and Sciences website and see this whole conference. Over and over again, they said AI is only free right now until the consumers train it, and then it'll cost money. So once we are done using AI, it's not like we have a choice whether or not, because Google, for example, uses AI whether we want them to or not. They will use it. They'll end up charging us for it once it becomes mature enough. Once it gets enough language in its large language model, then it's going to become a different thing, and that's going to become a currency exchange, not just for big business, but also people who rely on these things for a long time and who might reach some economic uncertainty. And it's like, well, cut off our employees, our communications people. We don't need them anymore because ChatGPT 5 is so good. And it's not, it's the record. But yeah, I think it's just important to note that that's another argument that is fed by the industry, but like with a lot of things they do, it's unproven claims. I heard at that conference that AI is going to be responsible for curing cancer, but then when the guy was asked why, he literally said, I don't know. So, like, just show us the proof in the pudding, and then maybe we can relax about this. But until that happens, every other economic model and any other just basic logic shows it's going to replace jobs and it's going to harm communities at the same time. And I don't know how we're going to supposed to get out of that, except for an inevitable outcome of having corporate lords that are Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. I don't want that to happen. Andy, you want to add on to that?
I mean, you mean the anonymous one? I mean, that has been said so many times that artificial intelligence will solve the problems of the data centers. And I mean, I hope it does. That would be great if there are ways in which they can build efficiencies into their operating. Some of the virtual power plant work is done, I think, by AI. I mean, there are benefits to utilizing, I'm sure, artificial intelligence, but I think the what we really need to see are technical innovations for cooling, for running more efficiently, and utilizing clean power and not fossil fuels. I don't know that artificial intelligence is going to make that change. So, um, I'm sure there are aspects of that that will be helpful. They certainly claim that that will happen. I don't think we have really seen it. I'm sure there's some grid work that's being done um, on AI, but as a solution to the myriad of externalities that the three of us have outlined today, I don't see that we're there right now or anywhere close.
Yeah. And look, there's also this other question. I'm familiar with the article. I'm not familiar with it. Data centers overwhelming the grid. Could they help it instead? That is a wild claim again of exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, could data centers help us be more energy efficient, or could AI help us be more energy efficient? Yeah, if it didn't cost us a million new fossil fuel plants in order to get to the AI that they're talking about. That argument I hear from the industry all the time is like, no, we're good for the climate. Except you're not speaking out at any utility that says we want to build a new natural gas plant or keep these coal plants on um, in order to power data centers. Remember, we take out data centers in most of the United States, energy demand goes down. That's certainly true in Virginia. Most states across the country 3 years ago, energy demand was going down even as we were retiring fossil fuels because energy efficiency through clean energy and electrification is actually saves a lot more energy, produce the same outcome with less power. Great. Data centers have had their chance federally and state in Virginia to say, yeah, we agree. We should have energy efficiency things. We should have these measures. No, because they're a business model. They're a business model, which means they want to soak up as much profits as they can, which is their right to do in a capitalist economy. But we should have safeguards in place, simple rules to make sure that they can't do that at the exploitation of us. We pay taxes too. Our voice should matter too. I don't care that I can't write a big check. I should be able to have my concerns addressed. Um, but this is just an industry talking point that again was brought up at that conference that I keep going back to, and they didn't have an appropriate answer for it. That's the problem. If we could go in harmony with AI and our environment, we would be in favor of it. If data centers could be developed in harmony with community level environmental justice, we would be in favor of it. I don't like doing this. It's hard work. But we do it because people's lives and livelihoods are at stake, and our economic security for already an economy that's failing so many working class people and middle class people is getting worse. This is one of the things that is accelerating an energy cost crisis. People are looking down the barrel of having to finance their electric bills, finance them with interest. And it's not because it's not because we're trying to solve the climate crisis with the AI data centers, it's because the companies don't want to pay for their own power needs. Plain and simple. And I don't have, I can't even entertain that argument because I've heard every side from the industry. So that's where I think I'm at right now. And if there is a new article that says, hey, these virtual power plants and these other things can actually help, I would so happily walk away from this work and let big tech do their thing. But there has not been a single semblance of signal that they're willing to do that, that they're willing to shell out more to make sure that we don't get caught in the crossfires of their development.
Yeah, that's a great point, Tim. And I remember when we were working on legislation back 2 years ago, and we met with Google because we wanted to talk about ways that we could have some safeguards in place for people. And one of the ways was thinking about investing in energy, backup energy that wasn't diesel. And we asked them if they would support legislation that would essentially put them in a position where they would be encouraged to use backup clean energy. I don't even think it was requiring them to use it. I think it was just saying if they want to get their tax break in Virginia, they would have to use clean backup energy. And in that meeting, they had said, well, we can't afford it. It wouldn't be able to afford it. So it kind of just goes to show, you know, we literally have brought these things to big tech. We have brought the ideas to them and the concerns, and yet we're still met with, them putting their own profits before the protection of the communities that they continue to develop in.
Yeah, it's not like we're not engaging with stakeholders. We are. We don't believe in just yelling and throwing stones at glass houses. We are working as I'm going next month back to DC to do a stakeholder conference. And if they blow my mind with some technological thing, you mark my words, I'll send you all an email that says, "Oh, never mind, they figured it out." But I'm not holding my breath. Also, there was a clarification about something I read earlier about Supervisor Pruitt reference. It was about quantum computation creating enormous data centers redundancy for AI training due to operational efficiencies. You were probably very clear. I'm just a little passionate about this issue and tired because this is what we've been working on for the last 3 weeks straight. So, my apologies for getting that wrong, but hopefully you all enjoyed my rant anyway.
I think another area where we've had a little bit of success is in changing the ordinances. And I know here in Fairfax County, we were able to get a few changes, not as much as we wanted, but for instance, we got a change in law that prohibits data centers unless there's a special exception from being within a mile of mass transit. Um, you know, Sierra Club is a smart growth organization. We like to see higher residential density around transportation hubs. And it was originally allowed, and we've seen in Loudon, they put data centers near the brand new metro out there. And that means that you can't have high density development because data centers are low density and they hardly employ anybody. So I'd say getting the underlying, I mean, there's the application approval process, but the underlining ordinances in a locality is also important. And you can, get certain protections written into law so that the developers won't even try, or at least it'll be harder for them to succeed. So um, that's just, like in Albemarle, they're going through that process right now.
There's a great question now that I think both of you are probably best qualified to answer, Paige, particularly your struggles with trying to get our elected officials on board with this and you as well. Is there currently a state or county that has in place ordinances that if a data center is approved, it must be built and operate using alternative power? I'm assuming you mean cooling energy and cooling process, not using volumes of water. Uh, I think it's a resounding no.
Hard no. We
Not,
try.
not yet. Let's put
Not
it that
yet.
way.
I
Not yet.
like that.
Not in Virginia, anyway. The cooling, the water generally is you have local water authorities, so they negotiate with the developer directly. Um, and those are often blacked out, those agreements. You just actually don't know how much water they've been given the authority to use. Um, but I think their localities are far more aware of how intensive this industry is and that they need to be protecting residential drinking water supply now more than they thought. There is a fight in King George County with Amazon right now where the local government really has gotten nervous that they gave away too much water rights to Amazon in King George County, and that development is stalled at the moment. So I think we are in a phase where localities are much more aware. They don't just go in blindly. I can't speak for all of them, but generally all of this information is now in the public domain. It was all secret, and in public domain meaning the issues like we're talking about tonight are not the data necessarily, but I think localities are getting smarter. But no, by and large, we certainly want these behemoths to be powered by renewables. That's harder in this federal government climate right now, of course, but companies like Google and Meta and Amazon and Microsoft are buying power now. And so there's absolutely no reason that they can't build clean power as opposed to fossil fuel power. And that would take the expense away from the public and also allow them to operate in a much more clean environment.
Yeah, I totally agree with Anne. We literally have nothing in place that tells them you can't take all of our water and you have to use clean energy. And these data centers these big tech companies will claim, well, we're building solar out in a different state and we're building wind out in a different place. And that's awesome. Great. Thank you for doing that. It's great. However, it does not negate the fact that in Virginia, we are building gas plants next to people's homes. We have Chesterfield Gas Plant in a community, and we are doing that for your power. And so if you really want to be a good neighbor in our state, then make sure that the clean energy you're building is here. It's affecting the energy that we use because otherwise, I mean, it really it doesn't mean anything to us because we are still feeling those negative impacts.
Yep. I will take this opportunity for the last question. It was also about some ordinances and example ordinances that requires them to do X, Y, and Z. Um, the Anne's report, the unconstrained demand, that was on that slide, and we'll on a follow-up email, we'll send it to everyone as well. That comes with example ordinances by issue. So by water, through energy, and those are local ordinances that are recommendations, which is fantastic to have that as a resource. And a lot of communities have benefited from it. Goochland County, the latest one, as an alternative, because I know it's easy to get into that crap where people say like, well, we know what you're against, but what are you for? I'll tell you what we're for is we're for treating communities with dignity. That's what we're for. And let's be honest with ourselves, this gold rush of AI is not sustainable. It cannot be made. So what we're also asking for is realism about how this can be developed. But what's actually happening is companies are competing with each other so that they can be first or best to AI. And the second thing is getting there to what they need to do is not a question that is predicated on possibility. The technology does exist. It's just a matter of political will to push back on them. The only way we get that political will is by calling out this issue for what it is, unfair. And it's starting to see that more and more in Virginia. And the model that we've shared today is supposed to tap into that and empower people to be able to get us there quicker. But in reality, this is, to the excuse of elected officials, it is a complicated issue. We make it complicated. By we, I meant like the industry has made it complicated that so that under the guise of we'll be transparent with you, these are the operations. But no, let's be honest, like the elected officials aren't necessarily going to have a PhD in engineering to understand these things or quantum computing or anything. Some of them do, and that's awesome. They'll understand it more. But that's not your regular run-of-the-mill elected official. Their job is already hard. They're not going to be able to understand these things. Then they're not going to get there to take an interest on the other myriad of ideas that they're issues that they're working on unless we tell them. It shouldn't be that way in our political system, but it is. We have to be the ones who empower them with the knowledge to be able to push back on things and also ask the right questions because it's very easy to fall into the trap as, hey, I'm a big industry. Here's a bunch of revenue I'm dangling in front of you. And it's great. How can I do that? I'd love to get that money to build a new school or fix potholes. And I'd love to be able to run for office again saying I brought this much money in with this development project. Like that's it. But it's always missing context because the industry is not going to tell them what they don't have to tell them. That's where we come in. When asked, another question, when asked why they don't put solar on their roofs, the data center coming to Pennsylvania said that it would only produce 1% of their energy. Uh, Without looking into it, potentially, because they're energy suckers. I mean, one data center could be a gigawatt, and that's the equivalent amount of power as a power plant, or approximately, give or take, the city of San Francisco. So yeah, that's even though it'll be huge, it's not just like the land mass is taking up, it's the actual energy it takes to do. The the other side of it is like we're not just talking about solar, but also storage. People say storage technology hasn't been good. Nope, they actually has gotten a lot better. In fact, in California, they were able to store 9 gigawatts of battery storage over this summer. That's doing the math before 9 San Francisco. So like again, like what I say, the technology exists, it does. But will that power one data center, just the rooftop? Probably not. No. That they could be right about that. But then that begs the question, why are we building something in one little place that is the equivalent power of a city? And what are you going to do to protect ratepayers and the community from the harms from that? So like there's an answer in there just by them saying that, right? And like I said, in Virginia, we don't even necessarily know how much power they all are consuming. We just know approximately what it is because reasons, competitive advantage, I guess. But we have a right to know because right now we're paying their electric bills and our electric bills. And that's what's happening across the United States.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would just say because we have a capacity problem in Pennsylvania is part of the same grid that Virginia is. I'd say anytime a data center can add capacity to the grid, it because they're going to, even if it's 1%, even if it's just to keep the lights on or to power the offices within the data center, that's power that we don't have to find elsewhere. So I think it's still fine to ask, and they should do that, for the good of the public and the cost. And
Yeah, that's a good point. They should at least try to do something. But
Yeah.
also, and then also depending on the data center, they might be using that roof for fan cooling, which is one of the ways they cool data centers, and they are extremely noisy. So ask about that. But, sorry, Paige, what were you gonna say?
Exact same thing that you said. Like literally.
Sorry, dude. Sorry.
It's all good. Um,
And we're happy to help if you have other specific questions or, there are recommendations in the report, as Tim said, at the end of each section, depending on what your particular issue is or concern. You don't have to read the whole thing. But, if there's questions or, we can look at a site plan or, can't do the whole thing, but we can certainly take a look and share our experience specifically and, send language if it's helpful. Happy to do that.
yes, totally agree with Anne. I get an email a week. I know Tim probably gets an email a week. I know Anne probably gets an email, maybe more a week, from somebody reaching out, needing one thing or another. And we are always happy to help in, however we can. Um, because this work is so, so important. And, we just want to be a resource for all of you. So I think that close. Do we have any? Oh, I see one more question. Have there been large protests? Well, this is an easy one. Yeah. And just did a protest last week, last Monday.
Yeah, I mean, we held a rally against the clear cutting of our, beloved trail here. And we had quite a few elected officials very, very concerned about this. And this is really where, the rubber meets the road is when this industry starts to impact our public amenities. And that's really where we're at in Northern Virginia. I'm not saying this will happen in other places, but uh, when you put such a high concentration of one industry in one place, it starts to really have huge, um, probably unintended impacts, but now they are becoming quite visible.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think there's something to be said for these community meetings that are happening too, where we have massive groups of people showing up. And in my mind, that constitutes that's a protest in my mind. And so places like when I went to the Charles City County Planning or Board of Supervisors meeting, the first one that they had, there was probably 80 to 100 people there. It's not a large county. That's a huge percentage of of the community that showed up, and that's a serious protest. Most there speaking against the project that Tim talked about. So, yeah, we've seen a lot of community involvement. We've all been a part of one thing or another, and it's been awesome. And like Tim talked about, we've seen wins from them. So, yep. All right. Well, I think that's it. There's no more questions. And, um, it's my bedtime almost. So we're gonna call it, but I want to give Anne and Tim a moment to say any closing things. I'll just say that we really appreciate everyone being here, just you showing up and learning about these things and kind of, giving out your own personal time on a weeknight to be here means so much to all of us here. And um, being educated on this is you don't have to be. I think if there's anything that I would like y'all to take away from what we shared is that people don't need to be experts on data centers, but as long as you can be experts on your own lived experience and how the project affects you, then you can win. And so I hope that's what you can take away, and I'll throw it over to Ann and Tim for any other closing remarks.
I'm good. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Paige said what I wanted to say. So there you go. She got me back.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. We'll follow up with a link to the report and the action alert too. Bye, everybody.
Night.
Thanks, everyone.